Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast, the podcast dedicated to simplifying the commercial real estate industry for the masses. Each week, we sit down with industry experts to dissect the many facets of commercial real estate and extract valuable lessons you can apply to your business. Whether you're a new or seasoned business owner or investor, the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast will be your go-to resource for all your commercial real estate needs. Now, here are your hosts, Raphael Collazo and Jeff Walston.
Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast. I'm your host, Raphael Collazo, here with my co-host, Jeff Walston. How's it going, my friend?
It's going great. Waiting around for Derby. I'm excited. It's coming up. It's Derby week and trying to dodge this flash flood that's supposedly coming into the Louisville, Kentucky area. So
I lived in Arizona for a long time, as you know, and I mean, flash floods used to occur pretty much on a regular basis. Even if there was a light sprinkle, there would be some sort of flash flood warning coming across my iPhone, and it would always be annoying with that little alarm that always goes off. But speaking of celebration, you referenced the Derby. We actually had a phenomenal guest today. Her name is Christa Bachar. She's actually an agent in our office, and she's been around for about 8 months now. But just in her 8 months of being in the business, she's really, blossomed into someone who has been really just performing extremely well just in her first year in the business. And so I thought inviting her on would be an awesome opportunity for people, in particular those who are just getting started in the commercial real estate business, to learn from someone who's really just kind of taken the reins and gone on in their career. And I know she has a very bright career going forward. But some of the things we talked about in the podcast episode really talked a lot about her transition into her different careers. She started out in a sales role with waste management, then transitioned into residential real estate, and then entered a leadership role with a residential company, and finally eventually got into commercial real estate. So she does have a diverse background. And I know the transition from residential to commercial is something we did talk about quite a lot in this podcast episode, which I know is going to help a lot of people, and particularly those who are in the residential space looking to transition into the commercial sphere. We also talked a lot about what do you need to do in order to prepare and grow within the business, whether that's from the knowledge standpoint and also from a presence standpoint, because as you know, commercial real estate and residential real estate are a lot different. So some of the techniques that you use to approach, building your presence in the market is also going to be quite different as well. And then finally, we kind of rounded it out to give an understanding of the current commercial real estate environment. Obviously, it's a very male-dominated business, and there's particularly those who have a lot of experience. I think the average commercial agent is in their late 50s, early 60s. So being a young woman in the business is definitely been a hurdle to overcome, and she's done a very good job. And she's kind of treading the path for more and more young women to be able to enter the commercial real estate space. So it's pretty awesome, some of the insights that she's been able to share. Jeff, do you have anything you'd like to share about Krista's interview?
I'm excited for everyone to listen and gain the knowledge, just like you said, especially someone who's been thinking about coming into the commercial real estate, who's in the residential side, and the ins and outs of both, and what's the appropriate way she actually gives you little tidbits of what you should be doing prior to even thinking about going to commercial. Gaining knowledge is the huge one, and how they differ. So, but other than that, I mean, tons of energy, and it's pretty exciting interview. So I can't wait for you guys to hear it.
Oh, for sure. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into the episode. Well, welcome, Krista. Excited to see you as always.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me.
For those of you guys who don't know, Krista's actually in our commercial real estate office. She's been with us for almost a year now. Well, about 8 months or so now. So
yes,
it's been great to have her as part of the office. So to start out, I kind of wanted to touch base and really get the listeners to learn a little bit more about you as a person. So can you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, of course. So my name is Christa Bachar. I am Turkish. I have lived in Louisville for about 4 years now. And part of what's helped me gotten into commercial is the fact that I have jumped careers as soon as I knew I wanted to level up, per se, in a personal way. So a little bit of my business background is I went to Illinois State University and I majored in professional sales. Once I graduated, I did inside sales job, hitting the phones, and I have never hated my life so much. And then I transitioned out of that, did outside sales for waste management, and I went door to door, door knocking on businesses and sold them dumpsters. And I have so many landfill fun facts that nobody ever wants to know, just to my core now. and decided that the micromanagement became a little bit unbearable there. So I decided to go the whole other end of the spectrum and jumped into real estate, because one of the best saleswomen I've ever seen sold 12 houses in her first month in real estate. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. So let's see if I could give it a shot. And I told myself if I had not sold one house in 6 months, that I would go back into the corporate world, because I'm very corporate structured. I love being organized and scheduling everything with my life, personal and business. And I sold 13 houses in my first 6 months. And then I sold 26 houses in my first 10 months. And, I was good at it and I enjoyed it, but it really was not fulfilling for me. And it did not make me very happy. I'm sure we'll dive a little bit more into that later, but I decided that I wanted more of a leadership role. So I actually put my hat in the ring to lead the second largest brokerage in Louisville. It has 250 real estate agents, almost all residential. And I actually got the job after 9 interviews. So it was a wonderful experience, and I learned a lot of lessons, good and bad. But I decided, for me personally, I am very driven on my own path, and trying to coach and help unmotivated people along the way was very draining for me. And so I decided to take the leap, with my fiance's blessing, and join just the commercial world and pretty much drop residential. And like Raphael said, I joined Grisanti Group about 8 months ago, and every day is a learning experience. So it's been a great transition, and I finally feel like I'm where I should be.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, like Krista was saying, she's got quite a diverse background, which we'll dive into the rest of this call and explain it. But I think it's gonna lend herself well to succeeding in the commercial space. So that's great.
So you got into commercial real estate. What made you want to lean towards commercial more than residential? Was there a factor there? And then on that point, is there a specialization that you kind of lean towards in your commercial? And is that industrial or retail, or what is that? Can you let us in on that? So
yeah, of course. Great question. So I actually was greatly on the fence about joining commercial before I went into residential. I didn't know which way I wanted to go. And most of the commercial brokerages I interviewed said, if you start residential, we'll actually want you less, because we'll have to retrain you. And, I took that with a grain of salt. I'm a fast learner, and I was like, whatever, and decided to go into residential for the personal support I would have had on a team. And I left residential, to answer your question, Jeff, because of just the emotional toll it started to take over time. And, some listeners might be residential agents, on the fence themselves. Some people might not know anything about, residential real estate in general, but a lot of people will tell you that they go into residential real estate because they want a flexible schedule. Well, what they don't realize is that your first 2 years, you are a slave to any client you could possibly get. And so, especially like right now, when we're in an insane seller's market, I have friends right now that do residential, and a house will hit at 10 in the morning and they have 5 offers by 4 o'clock in the same day. And to be able to drop everything over and over and over and drive 45 minutes across town. And then sometimes people would drive up to the house and they're like, I don't like the landscaping, we're going to pass. And they don't know what you've sacrificed to make that work. And I was blessed to be on a team that paid for leads for me. So I would call hours every day, internet leads. And it felt so much like my first job that I hated so much. And, I've grown in my professionalism and how I am on the phone, but how it feels to me inside is still the same toll it did before.
Yeah.
And so it just got really old all of a sudden. And I looked around and I realized that, a lot of residential agents come from caring industries, like teachers or nurses or healthcare facilities or, that type of atmosphere, or they were stay-at-home moms for years, which are so respectable, and it's a great opportunity for people to make a lot of income, if they put their effort into it. But for someone who, like me, is very numbers based and very like, show it to me on paper and let's see if it makes sense. There were so many conversations I had to have that in my own mind, I'm like, this does not make sense. Like, I don't know why you're not getting it. And it was fascinating how sometimes I would look at clients and be like, you should not do this. Like, this is not a good opportunity for you. You need to walk. We need to just terminate this deal. And some people would get offended. And it's like, if you can't trust me and you're going to go to the 5,000 other real estate agents in Louisville and be like, well, they'll do what I want. Cool. Go to them, because at the end of the day, I have worked really hard to study what I know. And I'm just going to share my opinion in your best interest. If you still want to buy it, okay, buy it. But, I have had situations where clients don't listen, they don't educate themselves, and then they come back and bite you in the butt because now they're angry after the deal's already done. And in residential, it's usually 30 to 45 day turnaround. So even though the deals are much smaller than commercial, most times there's a lot more of them. So it can just be very chaotic when you have, 5 to 9 deals going on at the same time. Usually individual agents will have that type, if they're doing pretty well, they'll have 5 to 9 deals at once. But the agents that have escalated their business and now they have an admin and, a buyer's agent and people help them. I mean, they could have 25 to 30 deals going at once. So it just, my mind that has to be so organized and has an itinerary every day, it was just chaos day after day, and was just really stressful because I wasn't able to live my own life. I couldn't tell you one successful residential real estate agent that does not work on vacation. I've had friends that have been accidentally starving themselves because they don't have time to eat, and then they're stressed and they can't sleep right. I mean, it affects you physically. So long answer to your short question, Jeff, I'm sorry, is, for me, I wanted something where I could do the research and just show it to someone. And commercial is usually, business owners. So they already have the education level to run their own business and also have the acumen to know what's professional and what's not. And that is a really big impact that I love about commercial, and part of the big reason that I chose to switch. For me, I would definitely prefer faster sales cycles. And, we'll talk more about how that kind of drives me crazy, especially compared to residential. But when you put the work in, and in residential, it's always a 50-50 shot. Literally the morning of closing, it could terminate. Like, you don't ever calculate how much your commission is going to be because you don't know if you're going to get it till you're at the closing table. And even sometimes someone could have a credit problem and it's still not closed, and so you have to take everything with a grain of salt. But usually in commercial, you feel pretty good. Everybody's spent a lot of money to make this deal happen. Everybody's done their research to know they really want it, and they weren't like trying to go under peer pressure just to have somewhere to live, like that can happen in residential. So there's a lot of pros and cons, but for me personally, it was more the emotional toll it started to take, and just the type of people I wanted to be around. I think everyone could say, I want to help people. Yeah, we all say that, but there's definitely certain people that always have their door open as the counselor, like, come to me, and I'm not one of those people. And God made all of us, and we're all the way we're supposed to be, and we're all needed. So it's fine. But that was a personal choice. And so when I decided to join commercial, I knew that I wanted to specialize in industrial. And the reason for that is because my father is an industrial electrician. My fiance is an engineer. I was going to be an engineer myself till I hated chemistry. And so, you go down these life paths and you realize what you like and what you don't like. And I knew that there was next to no women that specialize in industrial. I have reached out to almost every woman in commercial in Louisville, and none of them specialize in industrial. And in fact, I even had a brokerage that I interviewed with look at me straight in my face and say, there's no women that do industrial. What makes you think you're going to be the one to do it? And, in my mind, I was like, well, I will, and not with you. So bye. And you have to just keep on the path. And there's days I'm like, you chose this glass ceiling. Like, you did this to yourself. And then there's days I'm like, this is awesome. Like, because there's a gap. There's just a gap for young people, which I'm sure you guys have acknowledged and talked about before. And also, with women, a lot of women want to work with women. And also, there's a lot of startups and business owners that just want someone to talk to. And something that I have found is that there's a really big gap of humanity. I think a lot of commercial agents have the mindset and the exterior of not being approachable and being very, go and do your homework, and then you come and talk to me so I can do the least amount of work possible. Whereas a lot of people just want a welcoming space to just ask questions and know that they don't have to sign anything. And so it's been interesting to kind of navigate that field, because it's a lot of women in residential. So now I'm back in a man's world, which, is what I was used to and I enjoy, but it definitely has its hurdles.
Oh, for sure. And again, like you said, the commercial real estate industry in general is ripe for disruption. There's obviously new technology that's coming available, especially people in the younger generation have an opportunity to capitalize on that technological advancement. I think it's awesome that you're wanting to become part of the industry, because again, we need more women. We need more diverse people within the commercial real estate space, because it brings in new ideas, and you can, that's how the industries move forward and evolve and grow over time. Like you said, I think the commercial industry for a long period of time has been stuck in time. Having more people like you and other people like you in this industry can really move it forward into the 21st century. And again, the commercial real estate industry is a phenomenal industry to be in. It's a very lucrative industry, and it's one where you could get to help a lot of business owners. And given the fact we're in America, you're making the American dream a reality. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I definitely agree about the commercial real estate needs a little bit more diversity, I think, from different backgrounds and such to create a new stepping stone for the future, right? That's where we're headed. If you look at the age base of what commercial real estate is, you're talking, you're like an age bracket of 45 to like 75. That's the majority, right? So it goes from, getting more females in and different cultures and such, and the younger generations getting into commercial real estate. I'm actually excited to see in the next 10, 15, 20 years what transforms and perspires from it. So
yeah, I think with the digital age, it's opening up the industry a bit more. So now people that don't necessarily have experience in the business, because historically the commercial business was, oh, you're my family member, or you're my cousin, or where we have close ties. They're the ones who kind of naturally go into the commercial business. And you'll see this a lot across the nation, is where, my grandfather was in commercial real estate. So my father was, my son was, so it's like a generational type of business. Whereas now it's becoming a lot more digital, and there's a lot more resources out there to people to learn about the opportunities that are present in this type of industry. I think we'll start seeing a lot more younger people start being attracted to something like this, whether that's brokerage, whether that's, investment opportunities, et cetera. But yeah, I think it's awesome.
You were saying something about like the lessons learned and from the transition from residential to commercial. Like, can you let us know at least some of those that you learned that maybe differ from the residential to commercial space? Can you elaborate on that more? Or?
Yeah, definitely. So, and Raphael and I were talking about this the other day in the office. I think one of the biggest ones is, when someone gives you a referral in residential, it's like they want to buy a house. They know they want to buy a house. They'll probably buy a house in the next 6 months. Like, it's going to happen, or they're at least going to bluntly say, I changed my mind, I need to wait. But in commercial, there's so many people that have not educated themselves that they will approach us and say, I need a building. Okay, what do you need it for? What do you need in it? Do you need doctors? And it's like, they don't even know their own business yet. So then, I'll sit through and go through all the normal questions just to know what kind of building they want. But in residential, people have to be pre-approved before you can buy a house. And in commercial, that's not a thing. And a lot of loans actually are based off of the location that they find. So you have to do more commercial work up front. And I have had so many referrals just like fizzle into nothing because people didn't realize, oh, I have to pay to have an LLC. Like, oh, I have to like buy my own inventory and I can't really have a loan for that. Like, they just didn't do their due diligence up front. And so a lot of conversations, even though it's all about planting seeds, commercial is planting seeds every single day. And you're just going to really hope that they grow, but it might take 2 years for something to even happen. But there's a lot of people that say they want things and then they just ghost you. It's fascinating. We're in residential, like, I'll keep bugging you till you tell me what's going on. But in commercial, people could have no idea. They could be waiting on, some type of lawsuit to come through. They could be waiting on the city's permission to do what they want to do. We found the perfect spot, but they don't want to pay to rezone it. So it's just like, there's so many situations where things can sit in limbo that you just have to keep persevering and getting new contacts and new conversations. And it's so much more network based. So, I have realized that I have to go to as many things in person as possible because that's how I'm going to meet people, because I can't cold call businesses like I cold called residential leads, because that residential lead might not even answer. If they answer, they might not even remember what I'm calling about. Maybe they just look at houses for fun. If you cold call a business and you don't educate yourself on what that business does, who you need to talk to, you could get hung up on, or which is, what happens all the time. You just call them back and be like, did you just hang up on me? But I don't know. Depends on if you have the guts to do that or not. Or B, you could really unimpress somebody and totally lock yourself out of ever having a conversation with them again. And so you have to be so educated on who you're talking to and what you are going to ask them. And it's all about questions. Really important questions, really, thought-provoking questions. You want to impact people, but also come from, the stance of serving. What are you seeing that's going on in your industry? What type of trends would you like me to keep track of in the commercial side? And I can just educate you on as, I see things pop up. You want to have those conversations coming from a place of gratitude so that people understand that you're there for them, whether they need something from you or not. And that just takes so much more time to build those relationships and be creative about it too, because even though people don't have a ton of commercial agents trying to get their attention, they have so many vendors, more than we would even know, walking in, calling them, emailing them when they've never even met that person, and so it just becomes so much gray area that you have to figure out a way to make yourself stand out.
100%. And again, you got to think about it, in particular, the business owners that you're trying to get in front of. A lot of them have a lot of demands on their time, especially if they run decent size operations. Like you said, they're going to have vendors, they're going to have their own staff they have to deal with. They're going to have all these different demands on their time, and adding in another person that, unless you come in with a ton of value, you're just another person who's just trying to take control of their time. And a lot of people, in particular, those who are running large businesses and particular successful businesses, they tend to be pretty type A. So they get kind of frustrated when someone tries to take over their time when you're not giving any type of value in return. So I think that's a great insight to learn, because in a residential setting, like you said, there's a lot of transactions going on. So if you can't get one person's attention, there's probably another 100 different people you could try to get attention from. Whereas, there's only a limited amount of business owners, in particular, I would imagine in the industrial space, to tap into. And so you have to really make sure that the relationships you try to establish count from day one.
Absolutely. I agree. And I like what you said, Krista, earlier about planting a seed, right? Because I'm a commercial general contractor. So I may work on some deals with just trying to get a referral partner with a commercial real estate broker. So I'm touching, there's so many touches with them, like just watering that seed that might take 12 to 18 months prior to even getting the first deal. And then, that's the time to reap the harvest, so you would say. But yeah, I agree. I like that analogy. So,
and I think just something else to go back to the question you asked, Jeff, is just the people involved. I am full-hearted a control freak. I want to know what everyone else is doing. And if you're doing something I didn't tell you to do or I didn't know about, like we have an issue. And in commercial, there are so many people involved. You have to let that go. This is my lane. I'm going to do my job. I'm going to poke the people I need to poke and the timeframes I need to poke them to remind them that they need to do their job if they haven't already done it. But in residential, you pretty much just have an inspector, an appraiser you don't really talk to, and then like the closing attorney you meet the day of, usually, if it's a pretty, easy/decent deal. But in commercial, I mean, the lawyers are just involved the entire road. And then the lender, if they need one. And then there could be 6 inspections. And so you have to go and walk them through all those things. And then, okay, well, there's an appraisal issue. It's just, everything is more magnified in commercial. Like a problem in commercial is a real problem. This house needs this building needs a roof. Okay, in residential, it's like, let's just negotiate the price. But in commercial, it's like, no, like we can go build a new building cheaper than putting a roof on. Like, let's talk about that. So it's interesting to see how the conversations have kind of flipped and how you have to really keep track of people and be on everybody's good side all the time, which you should try and do anyway. But just to keep the transaction moving and make sure that everybody gets where they want to go. So it's something where you really have to lean on the core group and make sure that you have the vendors you really trust, because there's just a lot more intricacies with the commercial deals than there are residential.
And like is said oftentimes in sales, time kills all deals. So the longer deal cycle, I mean, in commercial real estate, lends itself to things popping up just randomly throughout the transaction and you having to deal with that throughout. And also on the commercial side, from a financing perspective, residential is pretty cut and dry, especially if you fall in line with like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. But when you're talking about commercial properties, each deal's in its own unique thing. And so you have to get a kind of an understanding of how the underwriting process works, getting those vendors in place pretty quickly so that you're able to say, okay, oh, wait, you're doing an industrial deal? Talk to this lender, talk to this lender, talk to this lender. This is what they're going to want you to provide them. So it just makes it there's a lot more variables involved. But like you said, since you like being in control and you really have that mindset of numbers, I think it's probably lend itself well to your personality. So that's awesome. So you talked about it briefly at the beginning of the podcast related to making that transition from residential to commercial. I was wondering if you could kind of give some advice to those individuals, because there's definitely a lot of residential agents out there that I've talked to that have said, oh, commercial sounds cool. I would really like to make that transition potentially into commercial. Can you kind of explain, what advice would you give if you were sitting across the table? Let's say I'm a residential agent and I want to make the leap to commercial. What advice would you give me in that scenario?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love it. It's a great opportunity. And I have a ton of friends. I mean, I'm going to lunch with friends today that just want to talk about it as an opportunity to see if it's something that they want to dip their toes into. And the first thing I will say above everything is if you don't know anything about it, then you either need to partner with a commercial agent or you just need to get a referral and give it to a commercial agent, because there are so many legalities in commercial that you can really mess people up because there's a lot more money on the line. And it's interesting that residential, I think because it's so common and it's so regulated. I mean, I've told Raphael weird stories about like, well, this is how residential works. Is that not what you guys do? And he's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like the fact that you can post a building for sale and not put the address and not put the price and then just say, call me. I mean, in residential, it's like, I need to know if 5 owners ago, if they're the ones that waterproof the basement, like there's just so many more questions and unknowns in commercial. So that puts liability on us as agents to make sure that we're asking the right people the right questions and making sure that we have the answers needed before people actually go under contract. But, the biggest thing is just knowing the order of a transaction and understanding the time that goes into it. I mean, the biggest advice would be to take the timeline you think in your head that you have and throw it away, because it's going to take probably 4 times longer than that. I mean, I was negotiating a deal. Nick and I, Raphael, were negotiating a deal, and we had a conversation on Christmas Eve, which, it's like funny. It's hard to get a hold of an agent after like 3:00 on business days because they're golfing or, people just don't check their phones. In residential, you call all the time. But Nick and I had this call on Christmas Eve when negotiated an LOI, a letter of intent. And that means nothing, pretty much, it's just like, this is what we think we're going to do. And so we just finally had this huge milestone of getting a $1.2 million property, under an LOI, and it did not get signed for a purchase until the end of March. And then they had 3 months of inspections, and then the lawyers didn't like something. And so, there's just so many steps that take so long. And in residential, it was hysterical. I would call agents to be like, you have 4 hours to give this back to me, or we're walking. And they would get it done. And in commercial, I'm like, see, here's the thing. We require a week to look this over, maybe 2, depending on how busy the lawyer is. So, I'll hold on to it, but just, don't guarantee you're going to get it back in a week. And it's interesting because nobody is in a rush in commercial. I feel like that is why commercial agents are needed, because we're the ones that keep it moving, or else everybody would just sit on it and not know what's going on. And then everything would just fizzle out. So, talking to a residential agent, that's the first thing. The second thing is, understand that you have to have the right forms, and you have to really know what you're getting people to sign, because there's a lot more words. I've been given a lease for one of my clients that was 48 pages long. Guess what? I got to read that, and I have to know what it means. And I have to know what happens if the building burns down, and, who's going to cover it. And so there's a lot that you have to educate yourself on. And if a residential agent wanted to completely jump like I did, I would say give yourself some grace and give yourself about a month and a half just to even understand what's going on, because you do truly have to start over. I studied zoning, I studied city protocols, I studied paperwork to understand what these lawyers were even saying, and so it just is going to take some time to know really how to fully tell people what's truly happening in a transaction. And you have to know your stuff in order to reiterate it to someone that doesn't know anything about it. So that would probably be the biggest piece of advice, is to just be patient with yourself. But also, if you're not going to take the time to actually learn it, then don't do it. Because it truly is two totally different kinds of real estate. I mean, they have almost nothing in common.
Oh, for sure. I think some of the things that you mentioned related to, with residential real estate, you have to provide like seller's disclosures. And I think that's what we were talking about, where you're like, oh, do we have to provide them with a seller's disclosure? I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? It's an as-is transaction in commercial. So literally it's you buy your own risk. You got to figure out what's wrong with the building. The owner may mention here and there what they've done, but that's not a prerogative or not necessary on the seller side. So that's something you always got to consider as a residential agent. And same with like the contracts, for example. Like residential contracts are pretty cut and dry. It's very heavily regulated. So all the provisions within a contract is essentially just plug and play. Whereas in a commercial contract, if it's drafted by some lawyer in wherever, they could give you a 50-page contract that has all these random provisions in there, and you're like, what in the world is this? And then they're going to have to send it to their lawyer, and they go back and forth. So it could take forever. And and also what I'll say, more so just for me being in the business for a little while as well, is giving yourself some lead time on transactions. I know in residential real estate, it's not uncommon for people to close, a home in their first month or 2, but in commercial, that may or may not be the case. So if you don't have some of the reserves in place, or at least have some other form of income to be able to offset, what you're doing, it could be very difficult. I closed my first transaction 2 months in, but it was a small office lease deal. And then it took me another 3 months before I closed anything else. So.
Well, and I'm, full transparency too. And like we said at the beginning of the call, I'm 8 months into it. And guys, I'm getting my second commercial paycheck next week. Hallelujah. But wow, that's 8 months. I haven't had really any income, and you have to prepare for that. You have to have a backup. You have to have conversations with your significant other, if you have one, to understand, what are we going to do? What's our backup plan to our backup plan, is what my waste management manager always used to say. So yeah, you got to think it through, because you can't just jump in and expect, maybe I'll be the lucky one. There's a lot of people that work hard out there. I had probably about 6 commercial agents tell me they made like 15 grand their first year. Yeah, and I was like, no. And I'm almost at a year, guys. Wow, that's kind of the way it is. And it's horrible. But I knew that. And that's what I signed up for. So I don't ever complain about it. And I feel so lucky to finally be happy doing what I'm doing, even though this is the least I've ever made as a grown adult. I finally feel like, the seeds will grow and it's going to come, and I'm happy. And at night, I don't hate going to work.
Yeah. Commercial real estate in general is a planting seed profession, right? So the first year, you may not make a ton, but guarantee if you keep doing at it and you have a persistent personality. So I think this is going to lend itself extremely well to you. But if you're persistent and you continue to do what you do and get out there, the sky's the limit to what your ability is to be able to generate income. So again, for those of you who are listening that are, in the residential space and you want to make the transition to commercial, if you have that type of personality and you're really committed to being the best in the industry, which takes time, I think it's definitely a worthwhile pursuit.
Speaking of knowledge, earlier when you were giving out the advice for the residential agents, can you elaborate more on that and explain maybe some of the steps that you've taken to like gain the knowledge of the industry and like the reoccurring education that you're doing and everything?
Oh yeah, definitely. So it's an everyday battle. Like you have to grow and teach yourself every single day. And so, when I jumped in, first thing is I took some of our city binders to learn regulations and zoning. I watched a lot of YouTube videos of really successful commercial agents to see what their advice was. I bought the book, Commercial Real Estate Investing for Dummies, and that taught me so much, guys. And usually I'm like, it's fine, I don't need that book. And I was like, I'll get it. And it was actually very educational. So get that. It was like $15. Something I do every day is every morning I have signed up to be on the instant email list for the Wall Street Journal. And I signed up for the economics updates and the logistics updates. And logistics isn't as necessary in commercial, but it actually does have a really big impact on just teaching you what's happening in the world. Like example, when COVID hit, used car sales are through the roof now, and people are having a hard time buying a used car because people moved out of cities and into the suburbs, and then they have to buy cars, and that affected office rents, in downtowns. And so it ties together, if you can link all the data, but that's something that I do to understand what's going on in the world, because it's so much bigger than us here, guys, in America. Like, yes, we have a big economy, but a lot of what we do, falls into pattern with what other countries do. And so understanding just the economy in general is something that you have to take the time to do. And then being able to have educated conversations on, what's going to happen. What's going to happen in the future? What's happening to office? What's going to happen to malls since the malls are closing and going bankrupt? And so that's something that's really helped me be able to hold my place, because I know what I'm talking about, because I read it every single morning. I sit with my tea and I read it. And, some mornings I'm late and some mornings I'm like, this was a really boring email, but you still got to sit and do the work. And then the more that you try and teach people about what you do, the better you will understand it. So that's what I really try and do. And I am the first to tell people, I do not work my sphere. I don't touch it. And that was a personal preference. I've always been that way. Not being from Louisville, I didn't have a sphere here. And, most of my sphere is either younger than me or, starting out themselves. So I don't really tell people what I do unless they ask. But when they ask, they fully understand, because they wanted to know, and I know what I do. And so, especially now that I'm in commercial real estate, people really have no idea what we do, like really no idea. It's very interesting. But when you're able to say, no, like I can help a lot of people and a lot of businesses, but I can also do land, and they're like, land? And I'm like, yeah, like empty land, it could be a big deal. Somebody could build a warehouse and create a lot of jobs, and it all ties together. And sometimes I can totally go down a rabbit hole and I'm like, oh, these people really don't care about what I'm talking about. But you have to be able to read your audience and say, okay, here's a good tip. I went to a seminar and they said, you always want to be interested in what people are saying. But the thing a lot of people miss is that you have to be interesting. And so we can spend so much time asking people about them. But if you don't give people nuggets about yourself, and just like drop little crumbs so that they want to know more about you, they're never going to talk to you again. Like, because they feel like they just word vomited on you and you have all this information that you really didn't need, unless they're definitely going to buy or sell something. And then, you both just go your ways and nothing was accomplished. And so when you're interesting, then people feel the need that they want to talk to you again. And that's how the relationship grows. So that's something that, it comes naturally, but it also comes with a lot of practice to understand and read your audience. And, it takes years for people to know how to do that.
Yeah. And putting yourself in those situations, which I think is something that a lot of people don't necessarily do. They just assume, okay, well, eventually things will start planning out. But in reality, they won't unless you put yourself in those positions to succeed. So I know you're involved in various organizations and you put yourself in those positions to be able to develop those types of relationships. And I will say on the other side for the knowledge piece, the macro and micro, understanding macroeconomics and then microeconomics, because on a macro level, obviously what's going on with COVID and everything's affecting a lot of different industries. I know Jeff's in construction and the price of steel's gone up, the price of wood's gone up. So if you're a business owner and you're determining whether or not it's better to buy a building versus build a building, right now, building a building is, it's very difficult. Unless you're really committed to spending a sizable amount of money, it may or may not be worth it for you. So the value of an existing property has actually become a lot more valuable because the cost of building a building is so much higher. So understanding that as a commercial agent, now you can advise your clients a lot more effectively. So I agree with you 100%. I think you need to get very familiar with the macro trends, but also on the micro level, because again, each market's different. So Louisville obviously is an industrial hub versus, maybe, New York City retail hub, et cetera. So it's like one of those things where definitely lends itself well to making sure that you're both following the macro and micro trends.
So what are some of the actions that you've taken to establish like your presence in the market and in commercial?
Well, the gift and the curse of coming from residential was that I had a ton of residential real estate friends. And so I get a lot of referrals through them, which has been wonderful. And, I had to have some hard conversations because, not that we have to go into referrals and that kind of thing, but I will say, and I will stand by it, that the work needed from a commercial agent is a lot more involved than a residential agent. And I have done both. So I can say that. And I know there's hard sellers and I know there's really picky buyers and I get that, but the legalities of commercial deals and having your stress under control is very challenging. And the fact that deals can go on, 6 to 9 months, and still might not happen when you put so much work into it. You just have to level the playing field and understand that you have to have some quantity under your belt. So I did that. And then I do a newsletter every month. So I interview a local business and I don't charge them anything. I get to tour their facility and I really just do it because I like doing that kind of thing. But also getting to know people's stories and what works for them. I have told several people in several different situations that as much as I love investors, and I have a lot of friends that are investors, and I'm so proud of investors for doing what they do, I really love helping underdogs grow a dream that they never thought they might be able to have. When they're so successful, they just have to just keep growing and hiring more people and get a bigger building. And I love being able to help people through that process and understand what the pros and cons are and maybe what the right timing is. So that's what I find a lot of joy in. So just talking to business owners about what their needs are, whether if it's commercial real estate or not, I think they really take that as a compliment to know what kind of clients are you looking for? I can just send people your way, and whenever it comes up. And then when I actually understand better what they do, I can represent for them better in conversations as well. So, it's a great thing both ways. And then I also lead a networking group like Raphael does. And I haven't gotten a ton of leads from that. It's funny because when you come into commercial, every single networking group is like, oh, we need a commercial agent. And then after I got asked like 5 times, I was like, there's definitely a pattern here because no groups have commercial agents, because a lot of commercial agents, awesome for them, but because they've been in it so long and their family's been in it, people call them, they don't really have to prospect for themselves. But also, like Raphael said earlier, there's not that many business owners out there. And so it just doesn't come up that often. So you have to really weigh the pros and cons for you personally. I do it because I love leading and I love, being an asset to people and igniting conversations. In commercial, you're all on your own. So that's the only facet I have to really be around people and helping people like I used to, even though I haven't got one lead from it. And I do pay to be a member of that group, but I thoroughly enjoy it and it helps me feel fulfilled. And, word of mouth. Those people will tell people who will tell people. And then you go to socials for those kind of things. So that's what I do. It just takes time.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll echo that as well as far as the networking groups are concerned. And I've noticed it more so on the, I guess, cultivation of relationship side. I mean, you're not from Louisville. I'm not from Louisville. So being able to infuse yourself into a social group is quite beneficial, in particular in Louisville, where a lot of it feels like a lot of the people kind of have their own cliques.
We call those cliques.
Exactly. Everyone kind of has their own clique. So it's harder to get into these social groups. So that's something that's obviously a benefit. And then cultivating like your sphere is something that I've been working on. And again, with this networking group that I'm a part of as well, hasn't generated a significant amount of leads, but the leads that have been generated have been through my sphere. So like the, commercial bankers that I know and, the commercial inspectors or commercial insurance, that sort of thing. So cultivating those relationships has also been quite helpful as well. So that's some great advice related to actually working your sphere. But one thing I wanted to ask you, which is something that's extremely important, and you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier in the podcast, is related to the industry as a whole. So the industry of commercial real estate, as you guys know, is pretty male dominated. And not only is it male dominated, a lot of it is, older people who have been in the business for a long period of time. Their families have been in the business for quite some time. And not to say that's a bad thing, it's just the reality. So one thing I wanted to kind of touch on is, how have you been able to adapt to this new environment? And then what advice would you have for women in particular that are looking to get into commercial real estate to maybe make the plunge and have a long-term successful career? Because I know you've talked to a ton of the women commercial agents in our market, and you've actually even reached out to people outside of our market to kind of pick their brain as well. So maybe you could share some of the lessons that you've learned from them.
Well, and I'll tell you too, a lot of the women that I've reached out to in commercial, they're older too, and so there's just this like whole area that's never really been accessed that I'm trying to navigate. And the biggest thing I can tell you that I found beneficial is, I think when you start, you find this, idea that you need to fit in and you need to mold yourself to sound and act and email more like a man. And I have just taken that and I have burned that, because I choose to be as different as I can. And I love joking around. I'm quite the smart aleck. And I think people find it really refreshing because they're already surprised that there's a woman walking through the door. But, when she's funny and she's bubbly and she smiles a lot, it helps the conversation go along. Not saying women have to smile, but if you're going to be in sales, you need to smile. So, I think that's something that's really encouraging, is just figure out what you want to be known for and take that idea and run with it. But also you have to be extremely adaptable. I mean, when I started, you can ask Raphael, every 2 weeks, I changed my strategy. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, people hung up on me that week. Okay, let me try calling this industry, and so you have to figure out, there are going to be a lot of men out there that are older, that have owned businesses for a long time, and they will only work with a commercial agent who is also older and has been in it for a long time. And I'm not going to win you over. Also not going to take the effort to try. It's not worth my time. And I really don't care, but the great thing about being self-employed is, if you don't want to work with somebody, you don't work with them. You don't ever have to talk to them again. And so you can just go and spread your light, and people will receive it and people will be welcoming to it. And there's going to be hard days where people were mean, or, you talk too much and that was on you and you overshared, but you know what? They would have gotten nothing if you didn't do it in the first place. So as long as you come from contribution and you try and share value, even if, I don't want you guys to think that value is always, well, I studied the economy and this is what the New York Times said. Value can be just brightening someone's day. Value can be sharing a story so people don't feel alone. And I think that's something that the men don't do, because this is business. Either only talk about business or go, because I don't have time. Well, guess what? I'm already sitting in front of you, so I might as well say what I want to say. And you can study some of the biggest, best salespeople, and they will tell you, if you spend an entire meeting talking about business, you will not close a deal. You have to build rapport with people, and you have to be able to hold conversations and ask people about their life and have commonalities with people. And luckily, I can hold that a little bit better than a lot of women because I come from a manufacturing industrial background. I drove a forklift for a summer internship. I've worked third shift before. I've done all these random things that, when I walk in a room in my stilettos, people would never imagine. So, I can tell some funny stories so that people are like, okay, she works hard. Like she knows how to work. But you have to prepare yourself because it is an everyday battle. Even if people don't ask you how you got a seat at the table, they're going to be wondering. And so you have to be able to hold your own and have the confidence to know, guess what? I worked my way here and I'm going to stay. So deal with it. Might as well enjoy our time together. And so I think for women, it's important to just remember that it's going to be hard because not many women do it. But if you can build the brand for yourself that you want to build, then you're unstoppable. Go do it.
100%. And again, like you said, just be genuine to who you are, because people read genuineness. I mean, if someone's trying to act like they're someone that they're not, people pick up on that quick. So I think it's awesome that you're yourself in any type of environment, because that's what people read, and people trust people who are genuine with themselves. And then just not being tied down to saying, oh, I need to know everything before I dive into something. You're always going to be learning something new. And it's okay to not know something. People who've been in the business, Paul even says it all the time. Like, I learn something new every day, and he's been in the business for 20 plus years, right? So just because you don't know something doesn't matter. Just say, you know what? I don't know that right now, but we'll do some research and get back to you. That in and of itself is something that could be really helpful and whenever you take on something new. So.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with you guys. I don't really have too many things to say on the getting more ladies into the commercial real estate agent, because I'm not a commercial real estate agent, but
even construction.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to lean to is in the construction industry, there's more and more women getting in there and actually running the full commercial jobs and project management and superintendents and there's also some that's even starting their own companies out there all across the nation. So it's definitely eye-opening, and because people, no matter if you're man or woman, if you can do a job well, and maybe you haven't been in that industry, but now you're getting into it and you start picking up speed and going, I mean, that's what you were meant to do. So if it's something that you enjoy and you love and it makes you happy, I mean, and if you think it will, I mean, you might as well try, right? I mean, it's time that you're giving up, but if you are willing to do it and try, and you're going to become happy and love what you do, then that's what you're meant to do. So, I mean, there's
life
no more
is way too short to torture yourself every day, you know?
Yeah,
absolutely.
And people respect people who do things well. So if you really refine your craft and become great at what you do, people naturally will respect you. It's just how it is. I mean, we live in a meritocracy, right? So in an environment where you're the go-to expert, if you've dedicated yourself over a period of time, people respect that. So
absolutely. So I know I'm going to kind of go off topic, but earlier you were saying that one of the things that you did to gain knowledge was to read the Dummies Commercial Real Estate for Dummies book. So to go off that, I was actually wondering, like, what is one of the most impactful books that you've read that maybe turned you into a different direction of career, or it could be anything.
Yeah. So it would be worth a whole other podcast. But last summer, when I decided to come into commercial, I took a really big step back in my life, and I decided to go through emotional awareness training. And it is so painful and extremely challenging, and it makes you sit with yourself in silence and ask yourself really hard questions, and makes you think through how your words impact others when you don't realize, and wow. I mean, it really just changed my perspective on life and changed how I talk to people and how I treat people. And one of the books that I used through that experience, it's not a business book, but it's called Present Over Perfect. And one of the quotes in that book is, I don't want to get to the end of my life and all people remember me for was being really organized. Because I think a lot of women, in general, juggle so many things. And then we also have social media that makes us feel like we have to be perfect and beautiful all the time. And so I think that just made me take a step back, and you have to meet people where they are. And you also have to do that in commercial. Raphael and I both have to look at people, and you do too, Jeff, and be like, where's the money coming from? Like, how long have you had this idea? What have you done to start implementing it? And so you have to do it with some, EQ. Yeah. But you have to understand that you have to believe in people's dreams, but you also have to have the knowledge to know how to make it happen or what they need to do to make it happen. So that book just really helped me because it just helped me understand, like, the world doesn't revolve around you. So you live in a world with a bunch of other people, and a lot of those people have feelings. And even though you might not acknowledge your own feelings, you need to take into consideration other people's, because that can impact how they think about themselves, how they chase their dreams, how they go home to their family at night. I mean, it takes a lot of time, and it was not fun, but it helps you be a better person. So, and
again, that kind of aligns itself with, I think, the concept of integrity, where you're trying to, project the person that you are in yourself to the rest of the world, and vice versa. You just want to be able to interact with the world in a way that isn't true to you, but also making sure that your impact on others is positive. And just because you have a positive impact on someone doesn't mean they're going to always feel great about you whenever you share this type of advice with them. I mean, I'm sure if you're dealing with an entrepreneur who has this dream of what they want to do, and they haven't thought it through very well, and you've kind of poking holes in their logic, again, it's necessary, and it's coming from a giving heart, but they may not take it that way, at least initially. But understanding that logic and being able to come from it from a giving heart is really, I'm sure, beneficial a lot. So thanks for sharing that book with us. One thing I wanted to ask you, kind of to round out the interview, what we usually do is we ask our guests to really provide some sort of resource to our, what we call the CRE treasure chest. It's a repository of resources that is available to our listeners so that they can come in and download these either PDFs or spreadsheets or whatever else, just helpful tools that people can use to learn more about the commercial real estate industry. So we always pose the question to our guests, what do you have to bring to us today?
So, we talked about what I was going to do, and I changed my mind, and I'm going to do something even better. So I'm going to share client appreciation ideas. And it doesn't have to be for people that are actually clients. I will tell you that I use this for people that maybe once told me they needed to move into a bigger building, and then now they haven't answered me for 6 months. Well, they're called pop buys. And when you go in person and you drop things off, it's a hard time to tell you no when you're standing there with a gift for them. But there's all kinds of fun things that you can do, and they don't always have to cost a lot of money. Next week is Cinco de Mayo. I've done chips and salsa. You can do share mark cookies for St. Patty's Day, Valentine's. And so I will break it down by month of different ideas that you can do based on themes. In this August, it's National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day. Like, that's not hard. Guys, you can make them or you can spend the money and buy them, but that's on you. So you can just do these easy little things, because if you want to, and I will tell you, in residential, this is a huge game changer for a lot of residential agents. You contact them before to see if they're going to be there. You drop it off. You're going to follow up with them later to see what they thought about it. Like, it adds so many more touches that actually have value versus being an annoying email. So I'm not saying to do it as often as residential does, because business owners are busy, and some gifts are like, I didn't need that. So you want to do it. I usually do about it once a quarter. And then you can do client appreciation events as an office. You could do barbecues, you can do potlucks, you can do all kinds of things. So I will share that as a resource. Just some ideas that you guys can take with your business, and you don't have to do a lot of them. Maybe you could just do it to clients that you've already closed, but that's what keeps you top of mind.
Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome.
Absolutely. And as we're doing a final close here, how can people learn more about you and get in contact with you to do such? Is there something that you'd like to share for them to contact you, and in what way would you like that to?
Sure. You can email me. My email is Krista with a K, Krista, @grisantigroup.com. And then you could go to, if you just want to know more about me, I do have a bio on the Grisanti Group website that you can read. I also have a LinkedIn if you'd like to message me on there. Yeah, I'm always open to have a conversation and even just talk things through with people. If you're interested in getting into commercial, or if you need help with anything in commercial, I gotcha.
Oh, for sure. No, and I'll include all that information in the description below. So whether you're listening to this on podcast medium like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, it'll be in the description. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll also be in the description as well. So feel free to reach out to Krista. So first off, thanks again to all of our listeners. We really couldn't be able to do this without you guys. We really do appreciate all you do. If you haven't already, we would really, really appreciate it if you could drop a 5-star review on the podcast. It really helps make sure that more and more people can actually listen to this podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel. It really, really helps with the YouTube algorithm and ensures more and more people can watch this video. And overall, we just are very appreciative of you guys, and we'll see you guys next time.